Hello and welcome to Knitting on the Lake. My name is Kelly and I'm your host. Welcome to episode 2 of a 3-part series that I am doing all about test knitting. If you missed the first episode, or if you're reaching through the wonders of YouTube search or Google search or whatever, you can find the first episode in the show notes below. There is a link below. And I talked about what is a test knit, what are the reasons why you may want to sign up for a test knit, the reasons you may want to think twice about signing up for a test knit, and how to find test calls and give yourself the best chance of being selected for a test knit. So those were all the topics from episode 1. In episode 2, I'm going to dig a little bit deeper and get more specific on the red flags and the green flags to look for when looking for test knits that you may want to participate in. As a somewhat experienced test knitter myself, I have personally seen virtually all of the things that I am about to talk about. I am not naming names. I am not calling anyone out. I think there's a lot of reasons why some of these things happen. And, I like to give everyone grace, but I'm also a big proponent of learning and sharing the knowledge with people so that they can make better decisions. I always want to help where I can, especially within the knitting community, because I feel like I have gotten so much out of this community on YouTube, on Instagram. I've learned so much, so it's, the least that I can do to contribute back into that with some information that I kind of wish that I had before I set out on my own test knitting journey about a year ago. All right, so we're going to start with the positive side. I'm going to talk about green flags. What are the things that you want to look for, the specific things contained within a test knitting call that are going to probably bode pretty well for how that process is going to go with that particular designer. So something that I always look out for is, does it seem like the designer is very organized and they provide a lot of detail about the project that they're asking for testers on? If their test call is proofread, it has a lot of information in it about the available sizes, the yardage estimates, the gauge. It has pictures of the prototype. If they're telling you a lot of the information of how the process is going to work up front, these are all really good things, I think. And it's indicative, just like anything in life, when someone sends you an email and it's like riddled with typos and, they use poor punctuation, you just get an impression, right? You get this impression that this person is not organized. They don't really care about how they're coming across. They might be difficult to work with. So I think the same holds true with test knits. If the communications that you get from the designer are really well organized and thoughtfully put together and provide a lot of detail to you, then that is a big green flag in my opinion. Another green flag for me is if the designer has completed a prototype of the pattern that they're looking to test. And, sometimes when a test knit comes through, you see there's an object that is in some state of completion, and maybe it has half of a side of a cardigan, or someone started the sleeve, or the yoke is done but the body's not finished, versus when you see a fully fledged prototype either hanging on a hanger or on a mannequin, or better yet, the designer is wearing it. Having that full object to see and consider, I think that is a really good sign as well, that it gives the pattern the best chance of being accurate when you go to test it, and that they've put a lot of thought into it already, and they've put a lot of work into it before they passed it on to you to take the ball from there. Okay, a really big one for me, and I think this is like a deal breaker almost, is that the pattern is tech edited. This is very good if it says the pattern is tech edited. Now I need to say, just because the pattern has been tech edited doesn't mean that it is arriving to you in perfect form. It probably is not. Tech editors miss things too, but having that first pass with someone who is like a master knitter and is looking at everything with a critical eye, checking, grading in math, and proofreading a pattern, they're just taking that first pass and that first set of feedback like off of your shoulders as a test knitter. So I think when a pattern is reviewed by a tech editor before the testing process, that usually is a really good sign and will help ensure that you have a positive testing experience. It's also a really good thing when the designer tells you exactly how the test knitting process is going to work. So there are many, many different ways to do this. There are people who run their tests on Ravelry or Discord or Instagram messaging or Facebook messaging, or email chat threads or Google Sheets, or I can't think of, there's a lot of different ways that people do it, and some kind of run it offline and don't have any sort of feedback loop set up. But when you have the information about how the test knit is going to work, that is a green flag, because it helps you make the decision if that is a process that you want to get involved with, and if that is something that you're interested in, because you may see that and say, like, I don't want people messaging me on Instagram, or I don't want to deal with going onto the Yarn Pond website like all the time. Having that information just is sort of like truth in advertising. It tells you as much as possible what you're going to get and helps you make an informed decision. Something you can look for that is a green flag is whether that designer that you may want to test for has a demonstrated history of showing appreciation to their test knitters. And that can be done in the form of reposting their finished objects on social media, just talking about a lot of designers actually will credit the test knitters in the pattern page on Ravelry, or feature their photos within the kind of like photo carousel of their pattern. So seeing how a designer has sort of acknowledged their test knitters can be a great thing to see, and something that, again, could bode really well for a test knit process. Another green flag is that the designer tells you how they will compensate their knitters. So most typically, there are different ways to do this, certainly, but most typically what you will see is the designer will provide the pattern for testing at no cost, which is completely the way it should always be in all test cases. They will almost always provide the final pattern of that particular object. Once the testing process is complete, they will send you the final version of the pattern so you can have it for your library. There are sometimes discounts on yarn that you may or may want to may not want to use for the test knit. Some designers have even arranged with yarn manufacturers to get free or sponsored yarn for test knits. And they may also give you a discount or free additional patterns from their own set of previously published patterns. And so just the extent to which they're communicating to you about how you will be compensated for successfully completing the test knit, that is all in the green flag column, in my opinion. All right, so now we're going to start talking about red flags. And again, I just want to first say that I am a person who tries to be very positive on social media. I don't like calling people out. I don't like spilling tea or being negative or talking about controversial things. Like, I don't have those clickbaity videos that say, my unpopular knitting opinions, and maybe I'd have a bigger audience if I did do that kind of thing. But I just want to be really transparent and really honest about what I have seen in test calls and what I've personally experienced in a lot of cases, that are things that you should watch out for. They may not necessarily be deal breakers in and of themselves, and you may choose to do test knit knowing full well like what you're getting in for, that it may not all be sunshine and roses, but knowledge is power, and the more that you're aware of what could be happening underneath the surface, the better, and the better informed decisions that you can make about whether or not you want to apply for a test knit. Okay, for me, a red flag is that the designer is being very specific about what they want you to use, like what yarn they want you to use in the test, maybe what colors they want you to use. I would be very wary of these kind of tests because, and especially for the yarn ones, I've not participated in a test knit where the yarn was either required or implied that more than implied that preference would be given to people using that particular yarn. It just, and knowing that yarn was, the sale of that yarn, it provides a direct benefit to the designer. It just is a little bit icky to me. To me, that is just not the purpose of testing a pattern. You can substitute yarn and have a really successful test knit. And in fact, I think substituting yarns should be a really important part of the testing process, because that's what people are going to do when they buy a pattern. Not everyone is going to use the recommended yarn. People are going to substitute what they have in their stash, what is available at their local yarn store, or just simply what they want to use for that object. So when a designer is really specific about things like yarn or color palette, I would just, kind of apply a critical eye to what their motivations might be for doing this test knit in the first place. Like, what are they trying to get out of it? Do they really want pattern feedback, or do they want, extra revenue from yarn sales, or, promotional material for selling yarn or selling their patterns, or both? Just something to look out for with a critical eye. If you see a test knit where the designer is providing a lot of requirements for how you will promote your finished object when the pattern launches, talking about, specifics on how to make your Ravelry page and how many pictures you need and what angles, and if you need to have modeled pictures, and what kind of lighting you should use, and what vehicles you need to post on, whether it's, Instagram or Facebook or, any other social media channel. The more they talk about things like that and the more prescriptive they are, the more I kind of squint my eyes and say, like, wait a minute. What is the purpose of this test knit? Is the purpose to get feedback and, get edits for your pattern and make sure that you're providing customers with a very accurate pattern? Or is the purpose of this test knit to sort of get a repertoire of marketing materials for free from all sorts of different people to show how your project or how your pattern is going to work up for people of all different sizes, and leveraging everyone else's social media presence as sort of like extra marketing, extra marketing voice, if you will. That is, to me, a red flag to look out for. Now, again, it doesn't have to be a deal breaker. Like, you could be fully aware of these things and still say, hey, you know what? I still want to do this process. That's totally okay. Another thing that I would personally watch out for is, flipping the green flag of the designer lets you know like how the test knit is going to work in terms of the process and what forums they're going to use to get your feedback, what methods they're going to use to get your comments and your feedback on the pattern. On the flip side, if they're not telling you like how you're going to give them feedback, if they're just saying like, oh, I'll send you a feedback form at the end of the test and then I'm going to launch the pattern, a day or two later, that's not really enough time to affect major changes in your pattern. And, if you just have a couple of days in between, when you're getting kind of collecting feedback from your testers and when the pattern launches, that says to me that like you don't really want the feedback. You just want a bunch of finished projects to kind of promote, along the same lines of what I was just talking about before. So not having, not communicating how they're going to get your feedback, what frequency they want to get your comments and feedback, how best to contact them during the testing process. Those are watch outs for me. It also makes me concerned that if I did have questions and needed pattern support, that designer may not be responsive, and that they don't want to have that back and forth with you and have that communication during the testing process. So that would be a big concern for me. If the designer does not mention how you would be compensated, it's a bit of an issue for me. I think that they should be very clear how the testing process is going to work, as well as what you're going to get at the end of it, be it the free pattern that you have tested in its final form, or additional pattern or patterns from their own library. Knowing that information up front, I think, is really important. It's just part of setting the expectations for potential test knitters to know what they're going to get, and making sure that they're not disappointed when they get to the end and find out like, oh, I thought I was going to get something out of this. I'm like, I didn't get anything, what I heard from other people who have done test knits. Another red flag is if you don't see specifically that the pattern has been tech edited. Again, this is the flip side from the green flag, which is the pattern has been tech edited. They tell you that it's been tech edited. If it has not been tech edited, they haven't stated that it has been. I would really, really consider if I would participate in that test knit. I would say for me, it's almost to the level of a hard pass. Like even if it was for like a really prominent designer with a really cool opportunity, I think the tech editing process in advance of the test knit is really, really critical. And so knowing that something had not yet gone through that process, I think would be a deal breaker for me, but maybe not for you. Another red flag to look out for is the deadline for the test knit. If you are looking at a test knit opportunity and the deadline is very aggressive for the type of item that it is, so let's say it's for a sweater and they're asking for these sweaters to be knit up in the course of 3 weeks, that is not enough time. I'm sorry. There may be some people who will be able to do that and to complete a sweater in 3 weeks. Especially in the smaller sizes, but for the larger sizes in that graded size range, that's just not realistic and it's not fair, and it's really pretty unethical actually. So those deadlines that seem very very fast, even if it's something that you personally might be able to accomplish, knowing that it's not equitable for people who are wearing different sizes, I think is a big red flag for me. All right, so those are my green flags and red flags to look for when you are considering applying for a test knit. And I hope that they were helpful and that it gives you something to think about. And again, I would say that, not all of these, even the red flags, they're not necessarily deal breakers for myself or for you. They're just things to, for you to be aware of and to consider that, it's possible that a designer may have other motivations that are driving the way that they're conducting a test, other than the simple idea of getting feedback from different knitters and revising their pattern and making sure that it's as accurate and clear as possible when they put it up for sale to the general public. There's oftentimes other things going on there that it's good to be aware of, especially in this day and age where algorithms and social media marketing are really helping to make or break the way that these pattern launches go. There's a lot of pressure on designers to to do things that may not work in the favor of the people that are test knitting. So it's just good to be aware of those things. We can definitely have some empathy or sympathy for what the designers are going through, while at the same time, just sort of looking out for places where you want to make sure that you're setting yourself up for a good process and, not being taken advantage of by, someone who may just sort of want your pretty pictures. And I really don't think that this is black or white. I think there's, it's totally fine and it's totally great for a designer to want to utilize those kind of assets that they're going to get out of the test knitting process to help promote their pattern. I think that is smart and it's something that they should do, but it's important for designers to remember the whole point of the process. It isn't marketing. Marketing is sort of the icing on the cake, the frosting. It's the thing that you get at the end of the process that's like, oh wow, this is great. We also have all these beautiful finished projects that we can showcase. The point is to kick the tires on the pattern, get feedback, and improve the pattern before it goes live. All right, that is what I have for you with this episode, and I really would love your feedback. on any hot topics in test knitting that you would like me to talk about. It could be things that I touched upon in one of these first 2 episodes to kind of dive in a little bit deeper, or it could be a topic that I did not address, or just something that you saw on social media that you thought was interesting, any controversies that you have become aware of. I would love to address that in the next episode. So that episode may be forthcoming in a couple of weeks. I'll wait a while for the YouTube algorithm to do its thing and hopefully collect other eyeballs on these videos so that we can get as much input as possible. If you liked this video, I would love it if you would subscribe to my channel, Knitting on the Lake, and like this video as well. And again, the link to episode 1 is in the show notes. If you missed that, hopefully you already went back and watched it first. And the 3rd episode, which has not yet been recorded, will eventually be linked there as well once it has been filmed. Thank you again so much for joining, and I hope that you learned a little bit today about test knitting. And if you have any questions, comments, please share them below. I hope you have some great knitting going on right now, and that I see you in the next show.